So today I'm going to read chapter one of Strategic Alliance. Strategic Alliance is my book. It is 504 pages of information that is very pertinent to um, the New African Revolutionary Nationalist Movement in America, formerly known as the BLM, which is the Black Liberation Movement, not Black Lives Matter. I don't know why they stole the acronyms, but it has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It is a compilation of various different sources. We have everything in here. You'll never read another book like this. It took me years to compile the information and understanding of movement ideology and cadre formations and military strategies. Um, it's a ton of information. And again, I think that every black household with serious people living inside that household should have a copy of this book, and not just blacks. The book, yeah, is written from the perspective of New Africa, but anybody can read this book and walk away with something. So let's get to it. So we're going to start off with chapter one. Mkuki was overlooking a map of Oakland, California, which had been marked off into grid coordinate zones of operation. He had been promoted by secret order as the new ground force commander of operations. The organization was undergoing a transition in the leadership command structure, and promotions were being handed out for tactical reasons. Internal discord was beginning to materialize within the ranks, and tensions were coming to a head. In his new position of authority, Mkuki was responsible for coordinating the activities of cadre sectors and establishing units where none existed. For this strategic task, he had a cadre of field enforcers and captains at his disposal, which made up the Ground Force Operations Command and was a central party organ directly under the Central Committee. Also present were his strategic advisory personnel, who were each reviewing field data and analysis charts of various kinds. A military operation was underway, and its successful conclusion was primary to a shift of power relations within the guerrilla organization. As the force of momentum fell to the new visionaries, the weapon of ideological struggle was being intensified throughout the various levels of the cadre organization. It had been predicted that the present state of affairs could only be redressed through an internal war of contradiction. Remember that, an internal war of contradiction. This is what the blacks are going to have to undergo in America, an internal war. This method of struggle was nothing new to the guerrilla organization. 20 years previously, internal blood was shed as a military purge was sanctioned to cleanse the ranks of reactionaries and set the organization back onto the path of revolutionary acquisition. The campaign of counterinsurgency warfare waged by the U.S. government under the counterintelligence program was an overwhelming defeat for the black guerrillas and a major setback for the New African Democratic Revolutionary Movement. The contemporary organizers of this movement for democratization were theoretically inexperienced and unprepared for the advanced machinations of the government. In the years of low ebb, a concrete analysis had been taken of the revolution in its formative cycle. What had been learned is that the movement's internal weaknesses surrounding ideological cohesion and organizational structure played more of a decisive factor in facilitating its defeat than did the subversive government strategy. In retrospect, the relative youth and gullibility of movement organizers and the science of protracted people's war put them in a deleterious state of disadvantage. Without the experience of history, the movement was without a materialist theory from which to conduct organized political violence as a counterpose to acts of aggression. As the military unit continued to make last-minute preparations, an electronic communication code was received. Decoding the communication, Damu relayed a series of electronic signals to a spotter unit cadre, given various instructions. Zuri Weusi had identified and confirmed the location of the target. Zuri Weusi has identified and confirmed the location of the target, he said to Mkuki. Mkuki was both relieved and apprehensive at the same time. He had been handed a dangerous assignment, and the target was formidable. "Can you pass me those dossiers again?" he instructed Mtambo, who was the chief intelligence expert of the cadre. A lot of planning and preparation had gone into the operation, and to facilitate its conclusion, a special division of secret intelligence had provided complete intelligence files on those to be liquidated in the military attack. According to the intelligence report, Mtambo stated, the target is being protected by Jabbar and Big Eddie. Mkuki sighed in frustration. He was well aware of the two men mentioned by intelligence. In the past, he had had an opportunity to work with both men on different assignments, and there was no question as to their proficiency as military tacticians. On more than one occasion, the men had proven to be deadly assassins. The unit that we will engage tonight, though small, cannot be underestimated, Mkuki inferred. What they lack in manpower is overcompensated for in experience, and then too, it would be perilous for us to presume that other units acting as perimeter guards haven't been camouflaged for defensive purposes. So the objective is to strike with maximum speed and intensity. This way the enemy will be taken by surprise, and before a counterattack can be launched, we will have faded into the abyss. My only limitation is that Big Eddie and Jabbar couldn't be convinced to defect from Raheem's structure and eject the Kidogo. Both Africans have made considerable contributions to the organization. In times of conflict, men choose sides to align themselves with for various reasons, Mkuki stated. In this particular case, secret intelligence tried on numerous occasions to get Big Eddie and Jabbar to abandon their antithetical positions and throw support behind the new cadre forces. These Africans remain staunch in their backing of Raheem and have since been classified as enemy operatives. Their deaths will send a strong message to other reactionaries within the organization. As revolutionaries, we are subordinate to the laws and dictates of party policy. When we step outside of ethical principles, there is a penalty of sanction incurred, and sometimes it is of the severest nature. With all important matters having been clarified, we should adjourn and carry out the assault, suggested Damu. The military unit was ready for action. From her position of observation, Zuri Weusi sat in a car on 8th and Wood Streets, anxiously awaiting the arrival of the military unit. She had to remind herself that patience was an integral part of their success. Uncharacteristic of guerrilla fighters, many soldiers had lost their lives in the War of Liberation due to impatience and lack of discipline. As a liaison agent of secret intelligence, Zuri Weusi was being utilized as a spotter unit for Mkuki, coordinating reconnaissance information with units of ground intelligence. Zuri's responsibility was to locate and identify designated targets for the military unit. Once confirmed, she was to maintain strict surveillance of the target and pinpoint its exact location or movement at any given time. Constantly updated information concerning the target would allow the military unit to deliver a surgical strike. In communication with all sectors of the military cadre, Zuri Weusi translated a series of codes that had been disseminated by the central nucleus. Being that Zuri was a spotter unit in the field, she had committed to memory those codes to be used in the operation. With no decoder system on her person, if she was ever taken into custody, the electronic code would remain uncompromised. Knowing that the military unit was en route, Zuri allowed her thoughts to drift back on the significance of today. It was the 8th year anniversary of her brother's death. Kijana, who was then 16 years old at the time, was on the run from the California Youth Authority Parole Division. Like so many other new African males of the colony, Kijana was young and full of energy, and due to social conditioning compounded with economic stratification of the black underclass, engaged in lumpen proletariat activities. Zuri would always worry about Kijana, who was becoming more disinclined to come home at night. She would always tell him that only the hustlers and thugs hung out at night. Unlike Los Angeles, Oakland didn't have a gang problem, but the politics of its streets were governed by the drug culture, and there was a never-ending spiral of violence that was subject to break out at any moment. Kijana would always assure Zuri that her warnings were being heeded and that he could take care of himself in the streets. On a hot July night in 1992, the Oakland Police Department and its gang drug task force was systematically tearing the city apart. The OPD was exercising a new initiative of zero tolerance. Police departments all across the country were upgrading policing doctrines by incorporating aggressive tactics learned from the military. The tactics used were along the lines of small insertion teams capable of quickly securing an area. While traveling on Foothill near High Street, Kijana and a friend were stopped by a detachment of the drug task force. Witnesses testified that when the car was stopped, both occupants were made to exit the vehicle, at which time a search of their person ensued. Not satisfied that the youth and their vehicle were free of contraband, the officers became belligerent and a scuffle broke out. As Kijana tried to flee the scene, he was fired on by two of the officers, striking him 9 times in the back. A riot almost broke out as an officer repeatedly kicked Kijana in the head as he lay face down in a pool of blood. Of course, the police had a different version of events. When word of Kijana's death reached Zuri Weusi, she collapsed in a trance and a few days later had to be hospitalized where she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. After the incident, black bourgeoisie organizations, particularly the NAACP and Congress of Racial Equality, called for a federal investigation into the shooting. Feigned outrage over the murder of black colonial subjects is a contrivance on behalf of the black bourgeoisie to curtail the revolutionary spontaneity of the oppressed, as well as to solidify itself politically. At the time of Kijana's murder, Zuri Weusi knew nothing of his political affiliation with the covert guerrilla movement. Kijana was one of a number of youth that had been recruited into a clandestine cadre designed to facilitate observation and screening processes. In retaliation for his murder, a police cruiser was ambushed on East 27th in Fruitvale, resulting in the deaths of his sergeant and his partner. An anonymous letter was mailed to the Oakland Tribune stating that New Africa will violently oppose acts of aggression committed by agents of the state, and retribution will come in the form of a bullet. Justice for Kijana. Long live the guerrilla. There was also an anonymous letter sent to the Oakland police chief warning of more violence. It was not long after this exemplary action that a contact of Kijana's introduced Zuri Weusi to Nkuki. As a dialectician, Nkuki's acute intelligence and interpretation of historical materialism intrigued her. It was Nkuki who indoctrinated her to the politics of the New African Democratic Revolution and armed her with a historical consciousness and contemporary analysis of Western capitalism, globalization. Recruited by Nkuki himself, Zuri Weusi joined the movement and pledged allegiance to the armed struggle. That was 8 years ago. In that time period, Zuri had shown an aptitude for advancement in the science of urban guerrilla warfare and had engaged enemy forces on a number of occasions. She was as tough as the men of her cadre and would kill just as fast. Her attention came back to the present operation. Since her last reporting, there had been no movement made by the target. Until the operation ended, she would remain in the area of activity. Looking around at the inhabitants of the area, she couldn't help but smile to herself. They were going about their everyday tasks as mentally repressed colonial subjects. They had no idea what was about to transpire. It's about to get funky. There are many forces inside strategic leadership that have become antagonistic over my continued appointment as Ground Force Commander of Operations, stated Rahim. At this particular juncture, it is not known how deeply these sentiments are echoed or by whom, but we could no longer afford not to address the issue. There are a lot of rumors floating around, and now I believe it necessary to file a motion of emergency grievance and properly take up the matter before the Central Committee. If I may interject, said Jabbar, I'm not totally familiar with the judicial process, but if you were to file a motion of emergency grievance, wouldn't it have to be supported by a body of factual evidence to even get the necessary votes to facilitate an open floor discussion? You are correct, Rahim responded, but there are ways that we can manipulate the conditions in order to precipitate a focus of priority. It is no secret that hostilities are beginning to materialize within the organization between different sectors of authority, particularly with respect to certain cadres. This adverse development has the potential to disrupt the balance of uniformity and create a dichotomy of structural incohesiveness. This will greatly impair my ability to establish unity of purpose, which fluid functional operations must be predicated upon. So what you're saying is that the present situation is preventing you from authoritatively administrating over Ground Force Operations Command, mused Biggetti. That's correct, but taking it a step further, I'm saying that morale is starting to be affected, and this is not good for a revolutionary organization. What about Mkuki? Asked Jabbar. At the mention of Mkuki, there was a noticeable change in Raheem's chemistry. Though quiet, it was obvious that he had become extremely vexatious. Mkuki was beginning to openly defy him, and on a number of occasions had countermanded his orders, thereby contributing to the insubordination of others. Raheem reflected back on his life. He was recruited into the organization at the height of the counterintelligence program, or the era before the transition was declared. Once in the cadre, Raheem was able to immediately discern that the men who called themselves the Revolutionary Guerrilla Fighters from Africa were different from any blacks he had ever encountered. Their philosophy is that they wanted complete political sovereignty from the American capitalist dictatorship, and that in order to realize the strategic objective, the Africans inside America and the world over must prepare for war. Hence the need for a guerrilla army. Throughout the years, Raheem had made many sacrifices in the name of freedom, and during the first internal war era of transition over ideology had fallen on the side of the new African revolutionary nationalists. But now a new generation was rising through the ranks. Like Mkuki, there were some within this element who were hardliners. Their rigid adherence to ideology was causing divisions that hadn't been seen since the inception of the movement, and quite a few of the young guerrillas were pointing fingers at the older generation for failing to advance the revolution beyond the quantitative stage of theory. Relations continued to deteriorate as unsubstantiated information began to circulate that a secret cadre, not sanctioned by the Central Committee, was plotting to carry out military purges against certain officials of high-ranking status. Mkuki was rumored to be the mastermind behind this plot. Mkuki ain't no joke. Raheem's hands tightened into fist as he thought about the temerity of Mkuki. Only a lieutenant, Mkuki had tried to make him look like a fool with all his philosophical rhetoric. In so many words, he accused Raheem of being a revisionist and the reason why the cadre structures under Ground Force Operations Command were weakening. To add insult to injury, if the rumors that he had been hearing had any validity, and Mkuki's disquietude was gaining momentum. This was evident in the suggestions of some of his contemporaries within leadership. Some had asked him to voluntarily relinquish command. Raheem thought this laughable. Without a vote by the Central Committee, he would vigorously oppose any attempt to have him voluntarily step down. No matter what the cost, he would use his position to solidify his power of authority. After we finish with our present task, I think it feasible that we eliminate Mkuki, Raheem stated. Jabbar almost dropped a kilo of cocaine that he was loading into a briefcase. Raheem's leadership cadre had organized vast distribution networks for illicit drugs and other contraband. Even though the illicit operations had never been traced back to Raheem, there were hidden operatives in the organization who supported this form of activity as a viable tool for economic generation, and unknown to Raheem, provided logistical support. To defeat the Black Liberation Movement, the government devised a national strategy to retard revolutionary culture and minimize the influence of militants on the youth. A strategic flood of chemical warfare agents was issued into the black community, which rocked the colony from coast to coast. The already fragile black political organization seemed virtually to disappear in the 1980s. Through chemical warfare suppression, the government was able to control the political direction of New Africa by targeting both youth and militants alike. This action triggered internal strife within the colony and reinforced the development of a diabolical subculture. Mkuki is an extremely dangerous man, Jabbar returned. He has contacts in all the right places and has ears throughout the organization. I'm the commander, Raheem exclaimed. I don't care how many contacts he has. Mkuki has chosen to defy my authority, and for this he will pay. There is not one individual who is above the laws of the party line, and when there is one who thinks that they are, severe penalties must be imposed. All I'm saying is that if we move against Mkuki, it must be a well thought out plan that can never be traced back to us. These fools plotting. And why is that? Raheem snapped. Because the repercussions will be tumultuous, Big Eddie replied. As the military unit entered the lower bottoms of West Oakland, a coded message was sent to Zuri Weusi, who was the main spotter unit and would in turn transmit the information to ground intelligence operatives. The lower bottoms was the area of operation where the target had been located. Because of its widespread drug activity and homicide rate, the area was a hotspot for heavy police concentrations. As the assault team, Damu and Mkuki made sure to obey all traffic laws taught to them in training. Setting a proper pace, they were followed closely behind by a reconnaissance interceptor unit driven by Mtambo. The RIU, as it was referred to, was an auxiliary force of the military unit and was designated for engagement action only in the event that the assault team came under fire by police or other antagonistic elements. Riding in a van modified from within with inch-thick plates of heavy steel that ran down its inside panels, the reconnaissance interceptor unit complemented a 50 caliber machine gun and was capable of laying down a deadly barrage of suppressive fire. Unless activated, the RIU would surreptitiously station itself in the area of activity. As the assault team continued toward the target location, the interceptor unit broke off out of formation to circle the perimeter to enhance area surveillance. As Mtambo drove down Wood Street, he spotted Zuri Weusi sitting inside her vehicle. Neither one of them made an overt gesture to communicate with the other. Communication was acknowledged through eye contact. As the RIU continued to surveil the area, they spotted a unit of the task force with 3 agents cruising on Peralta Avenue. Following procedure, Mtambo transmitted this information to both Mkuki and Zuri Weusi. Mkuki had decided on the setup site for the ambush. Raheem was inside a house on 10th and Wood Streets. Parked outside the house was Raheem's car, which meant that he would have to cross the street in order to retrieve it. Mkuki thought that this was when Raheem and his small cadre would be most vulnerable. Compounded with the optimal position of Raheem's vehicle was the street lighting, which on this part of Wood was shallow and provided the assault team with ambush cover. Checking ordnance, both men inserted magazines into their respective weapons. Mkuki was armed with a small, compact Kalashnikov assault rifle. The weapon was of new make and designed with a folding stock, converted into a fully automatic. Mkuki carried armor-piercing ammunition, giving this tool of warfare more capability than average small arms engagement. Damu was armed with a Mini-14 assault rifle. Damu had acquired an affinity for the Mini-14 after studying U.S. Special Forces training manuals. At over 300 yards, the Mini-14 was still a dependable sniper rifle. Mkuki held up his right hand and slowly counted to 3, at which time both exited the vehicle and took up positions at the arranged point of ambush. Mkuki positioned himself about 30 feet from Raheem's car, while Damu was situated on the opposite side of the street, directly beside the house that Raheem occupied. With this setup, the targets could be engaged in a field of fire from two different directions with little possibility of the attacking unit becoming caught in a crossfire. Dressed in black tactical uniforms and ski masks, the guerrillas crouched in the shadows and waited patiently for their victims to emerge. It's about to go down, boy. About 30 minutes later, the door to the house came ajar, and Raheem and his small cadre stepped out into the Oakland night. Raheem was at the rear and was carrying a black briefcase. Descending the stairs, each of the men scanned the area for any unusual activity. As trained guerrillas, security was second nature and was never taken for granted. When the small cadre reached the sidewalk, Raheem paused and looked toward the house he had just exited. Following Raheem's gaze, Nkuki noticed that the upstairs curtains had been drawn back. Though the room was dark inside, Nkuki knew that a sniper was behind the window. Damn, he cursed to himself. The tactical plan would have to be changed. Instead of opening fire on Raheem, he would have to neutralize the most formidable threat. From his vantage point, Damu could see the targets as they reached the sidewalk. Big Eddie and Jabbar were armed with weapons of some type. Damu also took notice when Raheem looked around. As the opposition cadre entered the street, Nkuki pulled back the bolt of the Kalashnikov, chambering around. When enemy operatives were halfway to their vehicle, Nkuki sprang from his crouched position and fired. Automatic gunfire shattered the stillness of the night as a volley of shots flew into the upstairs window. Taken by surprise at the assault, Raheem and his men never saw Damu step from his position of cover and take aim. The Mini-14 began to pop off rounds. Slugs from the 7.62 caliber tore into Big Eddie, spinning all 350 pounds of him in Damu's direction. Another burst of rapid fire ripped across his torso. As he fell to the ground, blood from a torn artery sprayed Raheem in the face. Recovering from the initial shock, Raheem bolted down Wood Street, heading in the direction of 8. In a perfect military stance learned from practice, Damu pivoted and sighted his weapon of war on Jabbar's head. Before Jabbar could open fire in defense, a slug slammed into his face, blowing off the lower half of his jaw on the right side. As he fell face forward to the ground, Damu ran up to him, firing. The bullets tore off what was left of his head, and his body went into a violent spasm as his nerves contracted. Nkuki was still firing into the window when suddenly a body fell forward and hung grotesquely over the ledge, where a river of blood began to run down the wall of the house. Coming from their position of cover, the assassins looked in the direction where Raheem had run. He was gone. Raheem done bolted. He up out of there. Looking through her night vision goggles, Zuri Weusi could see the firefight. She saw Big Eddie blown away. Raheem had taken flight and was running in her direction. Putting down her goggles, Zuri reached over and picked up an AR-15 assault rifle that was lying on the passenger seat. Quickly jacketing around, she stepped from her vehicle and leveled the rifle at Raheem. As spent shells rapidly ejected from the AR-15, Raheem's body was violently lifted off the ground and thrown into the side of a parked car. His left arm had been blown off, and it lay in the street, still clutching the briefcase. Slumped against the door of the parked car, Raheem's head hung toward his lap. Zuri stared down at the now dead field commander. Boy, they done took the field commander out. Out of rage, she lifted her rifle and fired a burst into Raheem's head. She casually walked over to where the arm lay in the street and pried its fingers loose from around the handle of the briefcase. She then got back into her car and drove away as if nothing had happened. When the reconnaissance interceptor unit spotted the undercover task force agents, and Tombo made the decision to maintain close contact surveillance. Automatic gunfire was reported in the distance, and the agents, while radioing for backup units, headed in the general direction of the shooting. Pulling down his ski mask, and Tombo followed close behind as Kidogo hit the unlock switch and pulled back the van's side door panel. The white men were filled with terror. As the RIU pulled alongside their unmarked car. Protruding from its side was the barrel of a 50 caliber machine gun. Flames spit from the interceptor unit as Kidogo racked the police car back and forth. The bullets were powerful enough to tear open the doors on the opposite side of the police car. The agents were killed instantly and lay in different death positions. Blood, guts, and brain matter was splattered all over the vehicle. Making a strategic retreat, the black guerrillas disappeared into the night. Okay, so that is chapter 1. You know, I'm inside the library, so I'm trying not to talk too loud, so I hope it doesn't appear as if I'm whispering, which I really am. But yeah, that's chapter 1. So in chapter 1, what we have is that we have a change of the guard, you can say. Nkuki is the commander of Ground Force Operations Command. Ntambo is his chief intelligence expert, and you're gonna find out about him. Ntambo is, you're gonna find out who he really is inside the book. He ain't no joke. Okay, Zuriwe Ushishi is a member of Secret Intelligence. And then we got Kidogo. Kidogo is also a member of Secret Intelligence, among other things. So what's happening is that, like Raheem said, right, rumors had began to float around that there was a secret unit inside the organization that was about to conduct military purges. And, you know, as we see here in Kuki, like I said in the beginning of the chapter, he had been promoted by secret order. See, Raheem was being militarily purged out of the organization. He was not going to be given a political purge where he could just walk away or step down, none of that, because Raheem wasn't going to do it. You know, Raheem is old school. So the organization is at war officially with Raheem's death. Now, as the chapters progress, it's going to be a dude that come up. We got some good characters inside the book. I mean, you know, some of the storyline might be a little corny. You know, I'm not an author or anything like that, but, you know, I gave it my best shot. You'll never read a book like this. The book is gonna get deeper, and deeper. The information is gonna become the information is going to get harder to read the book. If you're not a good reader, you know, I'm a very good reader, even though, you know, I stumble over my sentences like a lot of people do at times. But there's going to be a character that comes in the book. His name is Halifu. And, you know, this is a national organization, so it's implanted all throughout the black community across the country. So as the war intensifies, they're going to bring this one dude from Chicago named Halifu. And if you think him kooky, you know, as you become more familiar with the characters, if you think him kooky as hard, which he is, you ain't seen nothing until you get introduced to Halifu. I mean, Halifu is going to come to the West Coast, and he going to set that motherfucker on fire. This is how hard Halifu is. He gonna bring some people out there with him, and it's about to get bloody. This is one of the bloodiest books I've ever read. But it's a good read. A lot of, you know, information inside the book for anyone who wants to understand, you know, what the Black Liberation Movement was about. What the Black Liberation Movement, which has been defunct for almost 40 years now, what it could have become, what it can become. It's going to be this other character off in there, and, you know, he's known as the nameless and faceless one. I'm talking about this. We got some horror characters inside this book. But anyway, so that's chapter 1. I hope you guys like it. You know, I'm a good reader. I'm not the best reader, but I think I did a pretty good job. Tell me if I didn't. So again, Strategic Alliance. you want copies of the book, you can contact me at ECG Eric Carlton Greg. That's not the real name, but ecg.alliance@gmail.com, and request a copy of the book. Again, I explained in a couple videos, but the book right now is priced at $25, right? But this is $25. This would be the best $25 you ever spend, especially if you're trying to educate your children about New Africa, its politics, and what transpired in America. So on that note, I'm in the video right now. We at 35-34, so the video probably gonna roughly run 36 minutes. I hope you guys like it. Tell me what you think about the first chapter, man. I need for y'all to start subscribing to the page. As this platform becomes bigger, then the information that we put out on the platform, it's going to be more in line to what we need to know. I might make another video today, not pertaining to Strategic Alliance, but just pertaining to recent developments inside America as well as in the international community. I don't know. I have to post this video first. But again, I am Dumela. That's my name. I'm Dumela. As you see, my name is on the book. Dumela. That's me. Real name, Mariko Bowens. I'm the author of Strategic Alliance, the primary author. We had some other people who put some information inside the book, but I'm the primary author. So I'm going to end the video, and I hope you guys like it. Like and subscribe to the video. Please start leaving comments.